Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to Roots Refuge Farm. My name is Jess. We're currently in my greenhouse, and today I'm making a video on a topic that I cannot remember ever actually making a video on. And at this point, I've been doing this for 6 years. I've made, I don't know how many videos, a lot. I don't know, 1,200-ish, something like that. And if you do something as cyclical as gardening over the course of a period of time, like 6 years, you're gonna end up repeating topics. So when I got a question in my Instagram inbox and it got the wheels turning in my head, I thought I wanna cover that in a video, and I never have before. Today I wanna talk to you about how to teach people how to get started in gardening. I've actually got some seed starting stuff here. This is just on my to-do list today. If you are interested in actually how to start seeds, the materials I'm using, I'll put links down below to where I have covered those things. I have covered them repeatedly over 6 years. But today I want to just talk to you while I am doing this about teaching the subject of gardening. A lot of you may be here because you are new gardeners, and that's great. I'm so excited that you're here. I don't want you to just immediately click off this video because you think, oh, this doesn't apply to me, I'm not an expert. I actually really don't think that a person needs to be an expert in order to teach. I think you have to be very honest about where you are. Don't present yourself as an expert if you're not one. But just because you haven't been doing it very long doesn't mean you don't have something of value to teach. Now, maybe you're here and you have been teaching gardening for a long time. Please, can you throw your input down into the comment section? I love for that to become a resource for people to go get even more tips. The wonderful thing about gardening is that it's a process that is natural. It's designed to work. Seeds want to grow. All we really have to do is partner with things in order to give them what they most need. When we do that, for the most part, it turns out well. Obviously, there are always factors that are outside of our control, but it has been very encouraging over my years as a gardener to really realize how much plants want to grow and produce. One of the most encouraging things for me in my experience as a gardener has been the fact that my pigs, eating the scraps from the farm and from the garden where I throw them rotten fruit or stuff that got bit on by bugs or birds. I throw it out to the pigs and the plants grow in their poop. Not because the pigs pH tested the soil or because the pigs were so concerned that maybe their poop was going to be too hot with nitrogen and that they didn't compost it the proper amount of time. It didn't grow because the pigs plotted out the perfect space or because the pigs toiled over which varieties work best in their region. It grew because seeds want to grow. And that's been very encouraging to me. And that is why I encourage others to share what they know about gardening. And do not be discouraged because it's not rocket science. Many of you could be teaching other people to garden, helping, mentoring in some capacity. It's also, I want to say, okay to say, I don't know how to do that. I don't know the answer to that. There's so much information out there on the internet that we don't have to have all the answers. I am not ashamed, even though I've written a best-selling gardening book and I have a YouTube channel that has got a lot of gardening content on it. I'm not embarrassed to say, I don't know. I have no clue. Gardening is so regional that there are insects some of you tag me in pictures of and ask me how to deal with I've never even seen before. There are a lot of things I haven't experienced, and that's okay. You don't have to be everybody's perfect resource for gardening to have value in what you have to share. Now, if you think in your little heart that you would like to teach gardening, to share the love, maybe you're just bubbling over with excitement, maybe you're looking for community, maybe you just see a need. You see that there are a lot of people that maybe have the interest in gardening, but they need somebody to hold their hand. Now, for some people, what they're gonna do is say, I have a lot I want to share my experience, I want to share my learning process, and so they go and they start some form of social media, and that's great. I mean, I'm a big fan of starting a YouTube channel or a TikTok or Instagram or all of the above in order to connect with other people and share your experience. I would encourage you not to stop there. And I'm not necessarily making this video so you can turn around and make a video making all of these points. because it's already out there. I'm really more talking about gathering face-to-face, in-person community, mentoring people. And maybe it's not face-to-face. Maybe you are connecting with a person through the internet that's looking for mentorship and the things that you can guide them through. I really want to call you guys to the higher standard of really investing yourself in some relational teaching. And that's really what this video is more geared towards. Of course, it's going to apply, and you know, if you want to make a video for the new gardeners and all these different things, it'll reach somebody, it'll help somebody. But I really hope you will start letting the wheels in your mind start turning in ways that you could enrich your local community with this information. So ideas for that. I've talked to a lot of people over the years who have reached out to their pastor, and they've done a group at their church where it was like a beginner gardening class, at the local library, like garden centers, going and putting a notice on the bulletin board and getting a garden group together. A lot of times the garden centers will let you meet at the garden center if you're looking for a place that you can talk to the person, especially the locally owned garden centers, I should really say. If you talk to the owner and say, hey, I'm a really passionate gardener, I was looking to maybe mentor some people who are looking to get started, the garden centers love that, because if they have somebody that will come teach at their place, people are going to come to their place and they're going to spend money there. So you can find places like that that will let you get a group together. And of course, there is great value in social media, but if you are actively doing social media or looking to start it, you're going to start a YouTube channel, you're starting an Instagram or TikTok or Facebook group. On the early end, when it's smaller, let's say you don't have a large audience, I would really encourage you to get into some actual connected teaching. That's really where the value of social media comes in, when we're actively networking and not just using it to put our thoughts out there. We're actually using it to connect with other people. So finding your audience is going to help you kind of nail down what you want to teach, because whenever you have actual individuals asking you actual questions and telling you their actual situations that you can cater to, obviously that helps you outline what needs to be taught. So when you're teaching a person how to garden for the first time, one of the most important things is to be encouraging. Obviously, that's my approach. You see that a lot, even in this video, because truly it is a process that really works. And the things that people need to overcome in order to be successful in gardening are things that really require them just being honest with themselves. Like, I'm super forgetful. In my life, gardening was really difficult because I just would forget to take care of things. Now, when I was able to really honestly look at that and say the reason why my plants are dying is because I don't take care of them, because I don't water them and I'm not giving them what they need, I was able to set alarms. I was able to come up with systems that accommodate for the fact that I'm very forgetful, without shame, without condemnation. And that's one of the reasons why, for me, as someone who teaches gardening, I so heavily rely on encouragement, because I really do think that people can do a lot of things if they really believe that they can. And so by sharing the value of gardening and sharing your own personal experience with the garden and encouraging people that it is something obtainable, that's why I always challenge when people say, I have a black thumb, I can't grow things. I'm like, please stop identifying yourself with failure. You might be forgetful, you might be very busy, you might just be ignorant to the process. You've never done this before, and doing things that you don't know how to do is uncomfortable and hard. But when we encourage people past that point where they can simply take responsibility for their lack of knowledge or for their forgetfulness, then they can overcome that. So it's very, very important, if you are choosing to teach gardening, to be encouraging. Another thing, if you're going to be teaching anything, I personally think that written materials are good to have. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to develop materials to teach. Now, maybe you can. Maybe you're just going to print off a blank calendar and go over frost dates. Giving them something, I think, that registers to a person as a student that they are in a classroom setting, and they can then overcome that self-doubt that is so prevalent when we're ignorant to things. Calling someone ignorant is not an insult necessarily. I'm terrible at cutting hair. It's not that I, as a person, am a terrible hair cutter. That's not a trait of who I am and how I, am identified as a person. I just haven't learned. I'm ignorant to the process of cutting hair. And that makes it so much more obtainable to actually learn when you realize It's not who you are. So I think when we give a person something tangible that they can register, okay, I'm learning, then they no longer face gardening as something overwhelming that's wrong with them that they can't do. They face it as something they haven't learned yet, and then they can identify that they are learning and therefore have more success. It's one of the reasons why I always encourage people to write things down. I say get a calendar out, write this down, because I think that makes it click for people. Oh, I'm learning a process that I didn't previously know. If you do not feel confident in making some sort of material, get books or get a book and suggest that they get the books. Teach out of a book. I wrote a really good first-time gardening book, and I'm not just saying this to you to get you to buy my book. I'm saying it to you because if I were teaching a first-time gardener everything that I thought they needed to know, it's in that book because I wrote it for that exact purpose. And so it is very cohesive for a brand new gardener to not be overwhelming. It's $15, I think, ish on Amazon at this point. I actually looked in my house for a copy to bring out and show you, but I don't have a copy of my book, as it turns out. I'm sure I have some at my office, but I'm always giving them away. It really is great for first-time gardeners, and that's not just coming from me. It's got like 4,000 positive reviews. If you have another beginner gardening book that you like, use that one. That's also completely okay. Go to the library. If you can't afford to buy a gardening book to teach your class, go to the library and find a book that you can borrow and go through it, take notes to teach your class. A lot of times as a teacher, what you really need is the confidence to go in and present. Because again, whenever we can let people know that they're in a classroom and you are presenting information confidently, they trust you, they feel equipped, they feel knowledgeable. And for whatever reason, I'm gonna keep going back to this, this is a process that wants to work. We just have to partner with it, but for some reason, people are very intimidated by it. Anything that we can do to make them feel confident enough to start, the garden itself will hook them and teach them once they get started and have a little bit of success. So I will put a link to my book, and I think teaching out of that and having those materials and those charts to reference and giving people a diving off point, you're going to teach them a class and you're going to spend a couple of hours with them, but giving them something that they can go a little deeper and get a little bit more guided. You're not just setting them loose into running into failure. But that takes me to my next point. We have to prepare people to fail if we're going to teach anybody gardening at all, because they're going to fail. They're absolutely going to fail, and they need to go ahead and wrap their head around that, and they need to be okay with it. In fact, we need to give them permission to fail. We need to actually encourage them that the failure is valuable. And you'll hear me reiterate that a lot. If you stick around here, if you've been here for very long, you've definitely heard it. I like to say fail forward, harvest wisdom. There are all of these different things that I say to make it cute, but you're going to fail. You're going to kill plants. You're going to screw up. If you will look at it from the standpoint of that you're learning something that you were previously ignorant about, it won't feel like a total loss and you won't give up. That's the main thing, is really choosing not to give up is the biggest deal. So in a practical sense, like what do you line out for like a first lesson for a gardener? The very first thing that people need to know if they want to get into gardening is they really need to understand what plants need to thrive. Because a lot of people don't really understand that. A lot of people try to start their first garden on a very, very heavily shaded spot, and then it fails and they think they're a bad gardener, when really plants just need sunshine. And so teaching people that most plants in a vegetable garden need full sun, which what full sun is 6 to 8 hours of sun a day, and that most vegetable plants are going to need that to thrive. That's very important. So teaching people what is partial sun, what is low sun or shade, what is considered full sun. Different plants need different things as far as sun is concerned, but mostly if you're growing a food garden, it's going to need full sun. It's kind of one of those non-negotiables. Like you have to give plants light or they're just not going to thrive. The next thing is water. They're going to need the right amount of water. You would actually be surprised. Most new gardeners actually kill their plants from overwatering rather than underwatering. You can drown a plant. And teaching people how to properly gauge the moisture in their soil is really important. Now, one thing you can do is encourage people to buy a soil moisture meter. They make them for houseplants. You can use them in the regular garden and it'll tell you whether your soil is too dry, just right, or too wet. what I usually do, because I don't like to try to start people off with a long list of things they have to buy, because again, that just makes a way that it excludes people from success. I just teach people to stick their finger in their soil, and if it is dry further than to their second knuckle, then it needs to be watered. But if it is moist all the way up to the surface, then it does not need to be watered. Because if you go out and you just spray water all over your plants and they're dripping and you think, oh, that's good, they're watered, again, we have to go back to the soil, because that plant is absorbing water from the soil, not from the leaves. So just a quick spray down doesn't help. A quick rain shower doesn't help. You got to get down and look at that soil, grab a handful of it, see if it's dry and crumbling, stick your finger in it and see if there's any moisture at all past about an inch. The way I water my garden changes depending on what time of year it is, because obviously in the winter, I've got stuff growing in my garden now that I haven't watered all winter, because we're getting rain regularly enough. My soil is mulched and it's cold outside, and so it's not drying out, and so it's just not necessary for me to water those plants. Whereas in the summer, I'm going to be watering a lot more frequently. And people will say, how frequently do I water? How much do I water? How long do I water? You really just have to get into a relationship with that soil and be mindful of how it is reacting to whatever you're doing and adjust accordingly. But plants need water. If you do not water them, they are going to die. That's just how it comes down to it. If you water them too much, they're going to suffer. Watering too much causes your soil to just become so bogged down that it actually dilutes the nutrients. You can wash away a lot of the nutrients out of your soil by just constant watering. So you really want to try to get that right instead of trying to follow some formula that may or may not work. The next thing is that plants need nutrition. They need some sort of organic matter in that soil to thrive. Now you can get very, very technical about this. You can get soil tests. You can go to your local extension office, at least here if you live in the United States, we have those, and they'll test your soil usually pretty affordably. There are companies that you can get soil tests from. And that's really cool. That's a cool thing to do. I think it can be very overwhelming to new gardeners, and I don't think that it's a good place to start. Again, regionally, soil's going to change. My neighbor has different soil than I do. It's very, very dependent on where you are. But adding organic matter to your soil is going to help feed whatever it is that you have growing in there. I think it is very important when we are teaching new gardeners to make sure that they understand we are going for healthy soil. We are feeding the soil, we are watering the soil, we're covering the soil, and then we're going to put plants in the soil that if that soil is cared for properly, it's going to support the plants well. Now, because that is not how gardening is always taught and encouraged, a lot of times people start a garden and then they go buy a lot of fertilizer products that make their plants get really, really big, but they're not tending their soil, and then they end up with secondary issues. They don't know why. If we teach new gardeners to care for their soil first, they're just going to have a much better experience in gardening. So organic matter, I actually usually just teach people to add compost to their soil when they start. A lot of times people are getting started in containers for the first time, so they're buying potting soil, which already has some nutrients in it. And so it's not even that much of a concern for them. If people are growing in the ground and they're gonna till up part of the ground, I would just encourage them right off the bat to assess the soil. A lot of people are gonna argue on this because you really can't tell everything that you need to know by the soil from just looking at it, but if we are reining it all the way back into a very beginner gardener that we don't want to overwhelm, I actually think that you can tell enough. If your soil is clay, then you might end up having drainage issues. If your soil is sand, you might end up having watering issues. If your soil looks like desert dust and it is completely like dry and dead, we need to teach people how to add life back to that, how to add compost back to that, how to add manure. If your soil, if you're one of those people that lives like in Iowa and your soil looks like this, you can just grow a garden how it is probably. Like, I think as a mentor and as a teacher, we can talk to people about what this looks like and how to address it. But I will tell you, many, many brand new gardeners are gardening in a small raised bed in containers, and they are starting with potting soil. That means that nutrition is not the #1 priority for them to solve. Either way, I think that it's really good to make sure that people understand that healthy soil grows healthy plants. And soil is made healthy by the life in it being preserved, both by the proper amount of water, by being covered in mulch, and by being fed. And what it is fed is organic matter, which can be summed up as things that used to be alive or things that came from living things. So this is where leaves, compost, manure, worm castings, broken down wood chips, all of these things are going to add life back into the soil as they break down themselves. So light, water, and nutrition, I think laying the groundwork that is what plants need is probably first and foremost, and then next, the proper temperatures. So explaining to a new gardener that their vegetable garden is either going to be made up of frost hardy plants or frost tender plants is really important, because for whatever reason the big box stores here in South Carolina will have cabbages out in May, and if you come back 3 weeks later they will be going to seed, bolting in the cups at the big box store. You can't transplant out cabbages in May in South Carolina. It doesn't work, it's too hot. But they'll still try to sell them, and lots of beginner gardeners will buy them, and then they won't grow, and they'll think that it's something wrong with them and something wrong that they did. It's just not the time for that. And I think that if we teach people on the front end what temperatures different plants need to thrive, we're doing them a favor. And then looking at the calendar, and this is a big part of teaching new gardeners, is finding out your frost dates. And what I will typically do here is I will encourage a person to actually get out a paper calendar or a planner or something. If you're teaching a class, you can just print out maybe one page that has multiple months and have people right then pull out their phones. It is very beneficial if you are teaching somebody not to just tell them what to do, but aid them in doing it. That is gonna click for people a lot more. It's gonna make them feel empowered, and again, reiterate to them that they're learning something new that they are capable of doing. And have them get out and search their last frost date. Likely if you're teaching a class in person, you're all gonna be the same because you're all living in the same general area. And have them mark their estimated last frost date. From there, you could talk about seed starting. I think seed starting in itself can be a whole class, but even if you were going to just do a seed starting class, I would cover the things that I just talked about, because a person who's starting seeds for the first time, maybe they have the garden experience. It just doesn't take that long to go over the basic things of what plants need and what temperatures they thrive in. From the last frost date, I would then have people search their first frost date in the fall, and then search how many days are between the two, because understanding how many days are in your frost-free growing season is very, very empowering. A lot of people start shopping for seeds and they get, different things that say 80 days to maturity or 100 days to maturity, and they're not really sure why that matters. But when you see your frost dates and you see your frost-free growing season in numbers that way, it kind of makes it click. It also helps people to understand later that they can succession sow things if they have enough days left in their frost-free growing season. So it's really good information that anybody who's getting into gardening should have. Now, I do not think that seed starting is advanced gardening. I actually have taught many, many people to start their first garden from seed, and I know many people who have successfully done that. At this point, having shared for 6 years on YouTube, I've just received feedback from thousands of people who have done their first garden from seed, which gives me all of the confidence that I need to know that it's not too much for people. If you decide to teach seed starting, it is my suggestion that you bring materials and do a hands-on seed starting class. You don't have to have enough for people to start all of their seeds from their garden. But if you bring some seeds, if you bring a bag of soil, if you bring some sort of containers, you can use containers that are actually for the purpose of starting seeds, or you can just bring like red Solo cups and drill holes in the bottom. I am gonna scooch because the sun is super bright. Now, I actually think that seed starting classes are one of the very best ways to engage brand new gardeners in gardening, just because it gives people an opportunity to get their hands dirty, to get something actually growing that they can then take home, that it can sprout. It gives them that first spark and that first taste of what a wonderful joy it is to get to partner with the seeds that want to grow. It builds confidence and all of that. Also, with seed starting, it's going to point back to those initial lessons of what do plants need to thrive, and reiterating the fact that we are just partnering with something that wants to grow. That, I think, is the most foundational lesson for a gardener to really, really understand that, and to know, don't quit, whatever you do, because you won't ever learn to garden if you quit. But if you keep coming back, you're going to keep failing, but just keep coming back, and eventually you'll be a very successful gardener. Beyond that, of course, there are a jillion lessons that you could teach. You know, you could teach site prep, getting your place ready that you're going to put your garden in, which again goes back to what do plants need to thrive. A person is not going to put their garden in the low spot of their yard that doesn't drain well, because their plants would drown because they need the right amount of water. They're not going to put it under a bunch of oak trees because their plants would not thrive because they wouldn't have enough sun. Really reiterating that in site prep is pretty important lesson. Beyond that, you can talk about so many different things like spacing, maintenance. And I think that at this point, probably trying to teach a beginner gardener class that spans the entire season would be massively overwhelming. That's why I think seed starting classes are really a really great place to engage beginner gardeners, because it's a good way to get them started without overwhelming them. And then sending them off with connection to you for mentorship, or resources like a good book or a good Facebook group that they can engage with, and getting them plugged into some sort of community that's all going to be growing, that can share their excitement and their failures and their struggles together, is very, very important. One thing I would say is the exception to that. Whenever I say, you know, you don't want to overwhelm people with too much information, is I am like the mulching evangelist. Like, I so believe in mulching. And that is something that when people are like, oh, I want to start gardening, and they ask me right off the bat, like, can you give me a couple tips? I'm like, mulch your garden. It's one of the very first things that I share. It just alleviates so many issues that new gardeners have. It keeps the soil from drying out super fast. It helps the soil structure be built. In many cases, it adds nutrients back to the soil, like if you're mulching with like a broken down compost, a broken down wood chip, even things like straw doesn't really have a ton of nutritional value, but broken down hay does have nutritional value for the soil. But it's got so many benefits. When I drive past gardens that I see are not mulched, it blows my mind. It really does. In many cases, I drive past those gardens again in like mid to late June, and they have knee-high weeds, because it is so difficult to upkeep a garden that has bare soil, because the earth doesn't like to be bare. I can't remember who it was that originally said that. They said, earth is modest, cover her, she will cover herself. That to me just clicked in such a way. And the people that I have studied from much of my gardening experience, I've read books by Ruth Stout. I love Charles Dowding and all of his no-dig methods, back to Eden gardening. Though I've never actually really done a lot of strict back to Eden gardening, the thing that I took most from that was what a benefit it was to have a heavy layer of mulch down on your garden. Because by covering the soil, it allows the soil structure to be built. Again, we're trying to build healthy soil. It does help maintain the moisture levels of the soil. I live in a very hot place. The soil just bakes if it's not covered. And because of that, you have healthier plants. And then lastly, it cuts down on weeding so much to mulch. Huge difference in weeding. And the weeds that do come up are not those booger weeds that have super deep tap roots that you have to like dig out with a shovel. Usually if you have very well mulched soil, your soil structure is super loose, and so you can just pull weeds out with your hand. It makes it so much easier. So that's probably the one tip that any gardening class that I ever teach for beginners or for people who are not beginners, I will always just try to throw mulching out there, because I just believe it makes such a massive difference. And again, reiterating the idea that maintaining healthy soil is our goal. Now, I am an organic gardener. I garden with natural growing practices. I'm not certified organic, and I probably never will be, but I garden organically. I don't spray any sort of chemical fertilizers or pesticides on my garden or herbicides. And so there could be a whole class taught just about how to maintain your garden in that way, but I would not call that a beginner garden class. I would say these principles that I'm talking about are foundational for a beginner. And this is why, and at the end of this video, I feel like I haven't even quite given you a super great outline as far as what to teach. But the principles that I'm talking about, I know if you've been here long enough, you've heard me talk about them many, many times, because these are foundational. These are the principles that make a gardener. And I can confidently say that now after teaching these for the last several years, and how many people I remember when they came here and commented that they were starting their first garden this year. I remember their names when they were talking about their first time starting seeds and their first time growing a garden. And those people are now going into their 4th and 5th gardening years. Those people are now what you would call a successful an experienced gardener. Those people are the people that people come to with their questions and say, hey, I really want to learn how to do this. And I hope that those people are the people who are now teaching classes like I'm talking about, and turning around and instilling the confidence in other people to get started, because it is a process that really teaches you. I hope this helps you. I feel like I had in my mind that I was going to be able to come down and really like outline a class, but every time that I'm going to end up cutting out so many things, because every time I start going off into other things, I'm like, that's not beginner gardener information. The beginner gardener just needs to know that they can garden, and that they will learn through the process, and that these basic things are what they need to really fully wrap their mind around to have success. I'm still going back to troubleshooting when I look at plants and say, this didn't do well. And I'm thinking, what did it not have that it needed here? Was it the wrong temperature? Was it the wrong time of year? Does my soil need some help? You know, I'm going back to that. Even now, I don't think I'll ever stop, because frankly, we're just partnering with the process here, and that's all we have to remember. So I hope that this helps you. I hope that you are spreading the love of gardening, because even if you are meeting with a few people and you are sharing your knowledge, it is making a difference. Mentorship is just so monumental in our life. And when we are willing to share what we know with somebody else, we are spreading the seeds of gardening into the hearts of others. And I think that this is just massively important. And I believe that you can make a massive difference by just being open-hearted and sharing the seeds that you have. I bless you guys. Until next time.